when privacy became the world's most expensive amenity. At first, no one noticed what was missing. There were no paparazzi, no leaked photos, no accidental sightings. That absence was the point. To understand how privacy became more valuable than luxury itself, we have to look at the moment when visibility turned into liability. Fame stopped feeling glamorous. Wealth stopped feeling safe. Influence began to attract risk instead of admiration. And the world's most powerful people needed somewhere to disappear without vanishing. Hotels used to sell spectacle, grand entrances, recognizable faces, social proof. But this hotel inverted the equation. It promised something rarer: anonymity without sacrifice, comfort without exposure. A place where presence left no trace. From the outside, it looked unremarkable. No iconic silhouette, no signature entrance, no visual shorthand for importance. That was intentional. The less memorable the exterior, the safer the interior became. Guests arrived quietly, often alone, often under assumed names. Even other guests were unsure who was sharing the building with them. Inside, the design erased friction. Private corridors, sound-dampened spaces, staff trained to recognize patterns instead of people. There were no lingering glances, no acknowledgements. Eye contact was optional. Memory was discouraged. The reveal came not through advertising, but through behavior. High-profile figures changed their routines. Meetings moved here without explanation. Entire weeks vanished from public timelines. The hotel became a gap in the record. And gaps, for the right people, were priceless. Soon, privacy stopped being a feature. It became the product. And once that line was crossed, everything about luxury had to change. As demand for invisibility grew, the hotel refined its systems until they felt almost unreal. Guests rarely crossed paths unless they chose to. Elevators operated on silent logic, routing people without explanation. Dining could happen without shared rooms. Entire experiences unfolded without witnesses. The reveal deepened through trust. Guests learned they could stay for days without leaving digital footprints. No staff chatter. No incidental photos. No external records beyond what was legally unavoidable. The hotel became a controlled void, a place where time passed without evidence. What made this possible was not technology alone. It was culture. Employees were selected less for hospitality than for temperament. Curiosity was filtered out early. Questions were unnecessary. Silence was rewarded. Turnover was low. Loyalty was absolute. Over time, guests began using the hotel differently. It was no longer just a refuge. It became a planning space. Strategies were built here, not announced. Reputations were repaired quietly. Crises were paused long enough to be restructured. Privacy created room to think clearly. But this level of concealment carried tension. The more the hotel succeeded, the more it attracted scrutiny from the outside world. Journalists speculated. Competitors attempted to copy the model. Authorities asked careful questions. The hotel responded with transparency where required and opacity everywhere else. Inside, the atmosphere remained calm. Guests moved freely, yet cautiously. Everyone understood the unspoken rule. You were here to disappear, not to observe. The absence of spectacle created a strange equality. Without an audience, status softened. Conversations became direct. Decisions became personal. The hotel had crossed a threshold. It no longer reacted to the world. It insulated its guests from it. And that insulation was about to be tested. The conflict surfaced when privacy began to collide with consequence. A place designed to erase visibility inevitably attracts moments that test its limits. As more influential figures relied on the hotel, the stakes of what happened inside grew heavier. silence became powerful. And power invites risk. Guests started arriving not just to hide, but to decide. Critical negotiations. Personal reckonings. Corporate resets. The hotel became a pause button on reality. But the outside world did not pause with it. Events accelerated. Crises unfolded. Decisions delayed here echoed loudly elsewhere. Tension built around one central question. How much invisibility is too much? When does protection become avoidance? The hotel never answered. It simply continued to provide space, neutral and undemanding. But neutrality itself became controversial. Inside, subtle fractures appeared. Some guests stayed longer than planned. Others returned repeatedly, reluctant to re-enter public life. Privacy, once a refuge, risked becoming dependency. Staff noticed it in small ways. Longer silences. Slower departures. The reluctance to be seen again. Externally, pressure increased. Whispers of unchecked influence. Of decisions made without accountability. The hotel was never accused directly. It didn't need to be. Its effectiveness was proof enough that something unusual was happening inside. The build-up intensified as one particularly sensitive gathering approached. Multiple guests. Overlapping interests. All seeking the same thing. Time without consequence. But consequence has a way of arriving anyway. The hotel faced its first true test. Not of discretion, but of responsibility. Could a place built to erase visibility survive the moment when invisibility itself became the problem? The moment arrived without warning. No alarms. No confrontation. Just a realization shared quietly among those inside. Privacy had reached its limit. The climax was not a breach, but a reckoning. Guests understood that disappearing came with a cost. The longer they remained unseen, the harder it became to return. Invisibility protected them. But it also isolated them. Decisions made in silence began to feel heavier. Without witnesses, accountability shifted inward. There was no audience to impress. No pressure to perform. Only the weight of choice. Some guests left early that week. Not in panic. In clarity. They understood that privacy was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be transitional. The hotel adjusted quietly. Not by reducing discretion, but by restoring balance. Privacy remained sacred, but departure was gently encouraged. Stays became purposeful again. Refuge regained its meaning. The resolution reshaped the idea of luxury forever. True privacy is not escape. It is space to decide who you want to be when you are seen again. Today, the world chases this model relentlessly. Invisible entrances. Untraceable stays. Total discretion. But few understand the lesson learned here. Privacy is powerful only when it leads somewhere. What the hotel also revealed, in time, was something more subtle about the nature of identity itself. Most people understand who they are partly through the eyes of others. Not vanity. Reflection. The feedback of being witnessed, recognized, and responded to provides a kind of orientation. It confirms presence. Without it, some guests grew uncertain. Not about decisions. About themselves. The self that existed in private, stripped of audience and expectation, was quieter than expected. Softer in some ways. Harder in others. Some guests found this clarifying. The absence of performance made it easier to see what actually mattered, what they actually believed, what they actually wanted, separate from what they had always been expected to want. Others found it disorienting. Identity, it turned out, is partly a social construction. And when the social scaffolding disappeared, the structure it supported became visible for the first time. This is what the hotel's most experienced guests eventually understood. Privacy does not reveal a hidden true self. It reveals the architecture of the self that has been built. Some of that architecture holds. Some of it turns out to have been performance all along. The guests who returned to the world most changed were not those who had made important decisions in the silence. They were those who had quietly noticed, for the first time, which parts of themselves had always been theater. And chosen, deliberately, what to keep. So what do you think? Are we repeating the same mistake again? The hotel itself never claimed to offer this. It offered only walls, discretion, and time. What guests did with those three things was always entirely their own. That is perhaps the final and most important truth the hotel embedded into its design without ever stating it. Privacy is not a gift. It is a condition. What you build inside it is the work only you can do. And the quality of that work is what determines whether the refuge was worth the price. Not in money. In attention. In honesty. In the willingness to sit with yourself long enough to understand what you actually found there. The most expensive amenity in the world turned out to be silence aimed inward. Everything else, the walls, the staff, the absence of records, was just the frame.